I'm sure you're all learning with PR that there is no right and wrong answer. It's roughly a right direction and roughly a wrong direction. And that's what we hope to achieve with everything that we do, okay? Corporate reputation, so we're singing on the same song sheet. What is it? An observer's collective judgment of corporation based on assessments of financial, social and environmental impacts attributed to the corporation over time. So you see, it doesn't matter what you think your corporate reputation is, it's important to stakeholders. Basically, it's much more about how you're doing it on an ongoing basis, and again the definition's up there. So we're all, does anyone disagree with that sort of view? No? Okay, what I'm going to do is cover 4 case studies, 2 where it went right, 2 where it went wrong, to illustrate a number of points that we have and the way that we go about corporate reputation in the PR world. The first client was a client since startup in 1997, and by the time they left us, they'd grown to about 86 million, 40 countries. They were award-winning. They were on the Sunday Times Fast Track companies, and they got Queen's Awards and all sorts. They were a very ambitious, very egotistical organisation, and I think that was one that you always, when you're dealing with clients, you have to understand and work with right from the start of relations with them, okay? But basically, the philosophy you were dealing with within the company was very much the answer's yes, whatever the question is. They were into problem solving, fast tracking everything, and doing whatever they wanted. So corporate reputation has a lot to do with how people are and behave within an organisation as to how they're going to react to anything like putting news out there or dealing with their key stakeholders. They worked out, because of the skill shortage in that time, there were something like a shortage of about 15,000 people around the UK for jobs, that people weren't being trained up enough in how to work telecommunication systems. And they worked out that there was lots of sectors were laying off people, so in the steel sector. Their intention was to retrain steel workers where the skills that the people had there were good as a base, and they wanted to train them in to be telecom experts. So this was the press release that we put out. Okay? What we got was the support of the Electrical Engineering Union here and the Department of Trade and Industry. So there was a lot of politics involved. And I got called in probably 2 weeks before this was to be a major announcement at the Department of Trade and Industry in Victoria Street. The main news driver for any news in the UK is the Today programme on Radio 4. And what happened was, Ken Jackson, the guy that was quoted in that press release, was being entertained as a speaker on Radio 4. And it was on a totally different subject. It was about the layoffs and what they were doing about it. And what happened was, although that press release was embargoed for 11 o'clock that morning, he actually was asked to give, and this is quite common when you've got embargoed, journalists will try and get stories out of it. And John Humphreys said, right, we've just got 30 seconds, Ken. Can you just tell me briefly, we've got an announcement coming out later today, can you just give us the nub of this? And the facts that went out were, yes, a company called EXI are working with ourselves and the Department of Trade and Industry to offer 3,000 jobs to train people from the steel sector to the telecom sector. So what happened then was the whole of the news media went absolutely bananas. And we had 40 journalists, 10 TV crews, 2 satellite stations, all waiting for this announcement from the DTO, the government minister, Tessa Gorman, Stephen Byers, all the main people. So we started to get the reporting running, which was very factually correct, okay? So we'll be offered jobs in the telecoms industry. Factually correct, okay, fine, okay? Said it wants to retrain, still on message, all right? Corporate reputations, okay? So what happened was politics and egos took over the whole situation, okay? And we ended up with having to start to justify who the hell EXI were, this small upstart company, because they go for financial information, there's very scant information there, they see the size of them, and then they start to say, I really don't think they've got the scope to offer 4,000 jobs. So we were a victim of circumstances there, because it just so happens that Ken was on Radio 4 that morning and was only able to give basics across. Politics and ego start to take over with the story out from the other union. We've got no track record. Cynicism is poured into there, and you're starting to get the FUD factor then, fear, uncertainty and doubt, okay? And then this started to happen. So you're now into who the bloody hell are EXI Telecoms, and the BBC started to report to generate the news, okay? And start to manufacture information from, okay, the information they got about us, but then they're starting to pour their own interpretation, okay? Says it, and although they're saying it's laudable, that degree is sceptic about it. At that stage there were 40,000, they got up to 86, okay? Because of the lack of track record, okay, corporate reputation was questioned for the organisation. They were hunting way out of the league, okay, of what they should have been doing. Although it was an incredibly brave and bright streak that had led that company to make that business development and to decide that that's the sort of thing that they wanted to do. So our crisis management plan had been overruled by senior managers. They said, no, we'll be fine, let's go for it anyway. We'd done all the Q&As, we'd done all the pre-planning, but what we hadn't thought was that victim of circumstances, that we'd end up with that sort of problem. Lack of credibility, and 3 years later the company collapsed, and they attribute it directly to that incident, okay? Brock Carmichael, a well-known Liverpool architecture practice, been going for probably 20 years, well established, excellent reputation, probably can, of a lot of architects, Ian Simpson's the big Manchester one, but in Liverpool, Brock Carmichael are one of the foremost, UK-wide reputation organising companies. But they're not particularly well known in China, and they want to develop and get business over in China. That's the important thing to them. One of the fundamental issues was exactly the same as EXI, and that was there was a lack of a profile out there. There was no real media profile. They'd done very little promoting of themselves because they'd been a successful architecture practice. So this is the sort of thing that we had to tackle. This is an email that I sent to the person in charge of their Twitter feed, okay, which might amuse you. And then I'm starting then to take control of all of the tweets that they're sending out, just to start to announce this, okay? Alright, so that takes you from the sorts of things that we were doing, because they needed a track record in China, okay, so we were building up items that they'd done, anything that I can put through, and there's some further streams down there. We created about 5 or so press releases that had historical interest, and at least we could document to say that they had a track record on that, okay? And then the news then starts to go out. So we were daily reporting different places they were travelling to, giving the person that had gone out perspective on everything, and trying to build a real picture of the work that they were doing out there, okay? So the top's obviously the most recent, and then it works out from there. We did videos and all sorts, okay? But the key things we learnt from all that were groundwork is essential. Okay? There's 2 messages that you need to take away from it, and that's one of them. Do your groundwork. If you don't think when you're doing anything related to press coverage that there is a track record there, that the groundwork's there and they're credible, their corporate reputation will suffer. If the news you're dealing with is not on the same scale as what they've got before, then you do have a credibility issue there, okay? Now what I'm coming on to do is to show you 2 case studies in the same sort of sector, and again, how different facets of that. And again, it's about egos and about the personalities that you're dealing with within that organisation. Very much a project that we had worked with, but not that frequently. Sorry, not for that length of time beforehand, okay? But it was an ambitious regeneration project. What they wanted to do was to take an area of land, a long strip by a canal between a road, and they wanted to make an environment, a community for people over the age of 55. Just to illustrate the scheme, it was 170 units, so it was a big scheme. You've got the canal here. They wanted to build a bridge over into the village, which is a very pretty village, and they've got all sorts of blocks here. And some of the views of it, just to give you one of them. We got some news coverage with it, okay? Again, the facts were sort of there, and it was very much on message, okay? And it was very well supported by the local authority, because they have a severe problem of lots of people. The average age of people in particularly Cheshire is growing, so you're getting a lot of older people, and you don't have the facilities to cater for them. And they know that they need to build a lot more facilities for that sort of people. Okay? So going through that, we started to pick up the scale of the objections that we were seeing. Okay? And although we've got good press and stakeholder, i.e. local council, and they're the guys ultimately that are going to approve the project or not, okay? When we did the consultation, we had to hold a number of documents. In a hotel, you have a set time and all the locals come in, have a look at the plans and talk to you, sort of an open evening, an afternoon and whatever. You go through that. From that, we gauged that we were probably 50-50. But the problem is, on any protest, you've got a core of probably 30 or 40 people who will whip up support and make sure that things are blocked or however they want to do it, okay? Problem. And what they did was they went insensitive on this, okay, which was the wrong thing to do. Because they knew of the issues with the council needing this sort of facility, they owned the site, therefore they had a vested interest to do it, and everyone was supporting them and saying this is great. They couldn't see that there would be a major issue and this could possibly stop actually doing the work. And they went into the fear, uncertainty and doubt in terms of their own perception of the project. They felt they couldn't understand why people wouldn't want this in their backyard. And unfortunately that was the ethos that went through. A couple of months later, needless to say, plans were refused, and then about 2 years later the company collapsed because they couldn't recover. They'd already spent so much money on trying to get that development through because it was so important to them. But what they hadn't done is they hadn't invested enough on the PR support, and they did probably a little bit too much too late, and they really hadn't overseen the scale of what the issues were with that. And again, with corporate reputation, they hadn't put the groundwork in there, and they really hadn't seen what was coming. Okay? Compare that with Drive Me. Again, another planning application, very much large scale, of a similar sort of scale to that. I'll show you some plans. I've got some things. Okay. It was an ambitious regeneration project, again similar to Crystal Bridges. Again, we had to go through the compulsory consultation, so again, it was a local village hall, people come in and whatever. They consulted early, we had loads of time to do the pre-prep on it, we had loads of time to get a bit of a scale of some of the objections, and we had loads of time to build a good reputation with the local press, which was important. That's the state-of-the-art sort of centre that they wanted. They wanted to do corporate hospitality there, so it would be a good facility for the locals. And it was just off the M6 near Stafford, so it would be perfect for having corporate events. They'd already dealt with car launches there, and it would be perfect, you know, for BMW to launch their latest car or whatever there. So that's the sort of thing they wanted. And you can imagine that, again, going into another small village where the people really were not that interested in having that in their backyard. And that's what we got. It was said 100, it was actually about 46 protesters out. And they sort of camped out, they invited the BBC down, and we had a whole full-scale objection on this, okay? So what did we do? Well, the first one is don't panic, okay? Secondly, it's because we'd already built relationships up with the press, we got a balanced report. And this is some of the sort of reporting that we had. The other thing we knew was that based on the consultations we'd done with the locality, we knew that there was a balance of people that were supportive of this. They could see the jobs, they could see the tourism, they could see the benefit to the locality, they could see probably better roads having to be constructed to get to the site. So there were all sorts of benefits from that perspective. And they could also see the house prices going up. But then there were others that didn't want change. And again, you're dealing with corporate reputation. It's a bit of a woolly thing, and it's about people's feelings, reactions and interpretations on things. Okay, we needed the voice of the silent majority to be heard, and this is what sort of thing we did. What we did was to put people in to sort of see what the meetings were in the local hall, to not act as a spy in the camp, but at least to have accurate reporting coming back on what's happening. So it was important for us to get journalists and the press into those events so they could see how unfair what was happening with people being whipped up to a frenzy as to why they wanted to reject this, okay? And then we start to get the television reporting going and everything. So the voice of the silent majority to be heard, we were keen to get that through. Come and see, both with press, councillors and absolutely everybody. Other things we did was we started to sponsor the school. We'd had enough time to pre-prepare so we could at least build links with the community, because we recognised that the Drive Me directors had an issue and we needed to at least show them more as a friendly face, prepared to invest in the community. So it was important. We did sponsoring speed signs, brilliant messaging compared to what we were being considered against, and sponsorship of the school. And I've got picture of one of the directors at the school sort of having on a fun day where they'd built some carts for them and things like this. So, and great, opportunity for employment for the kids as well, okay? And that's what happened. They actually had the plans go through in a case where we thought we were coming from behind on this. We actually got that through. Now compare that to Crystal Bridges, where it was a really much clearer open and shut case where the corporate reputation was brilliant. We didn't manage to achieve the company's objectives. They've gone out of business. Drive Me are still live, having building every year, even through a recession. The company's going from strength to strength because they had the strength to say, we don't know anything. Our corporate reputation is not good here. We need to invest, build on it, and let's take it on from there. And that's sort of what you can do once you recognise what level you're at with the corporate reputation. Okay? So we had good press and stakeholder support because we built it. That was 50-50, gone through, okay, plans passed and the company's grown. Just a comment on how I think reputation is now compared to the times when we were dealing with the EXI. And that is because you've now got social media, you've got a lot more content on the web, it's a lot easier to get a better corporate reputation than it was 10 years ago. You can quickly establish that, and that's what we proved with Brock Carmichael. Okay? However, to balance that, and probably most things that you'll hear on corporate reputations these days, is that it's a lot faster to destruct. Whereas we were talking weeks in the early 2000s, and then it went to days, hours, it's now minutes. And literally with a couple of Twitter feed items, people have died when they haven't been dead before. People have had whole reputations, pictures they didn't want to be seen put on there, and all sorts of idiotic things. Okay. Reputation recovery. Once you're in that state, what happens? Okay. It's perceived to take about 3.5 years to recover from where you've got damage to your corporate reputation. And you can see there how that changes across different geographical areas. But you see how Europe's a little bit more sceptical, and yet North America's a lot more open. In North America, they often say that unless you've had 3 companies, 2 of which have failed before you've had a success, you're not really a business person, because they expect failure and they're a lot more tolerant, and they want, you know, they see that and they don't go, oh my God, don't touch them, don't deal with them because they've had an issue. They're a lot more understanding and tolerant, okay? So that's less.